In the beginning of March 2024, I turned 30 years old. This is going to sound a bit personal, but I wasn't always going to be here. Since my teens, I've contemplated a lot about not being here nor wanting to be for a huge chunk of time. So how did all that change? How am I still here? I just want to tell a little story of how I still managed to be here. Of course, my how might not resonate with everyone, as it's always a personal reckoning. After reading Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning in my early 20s, it struck me that in order to live and find meaning in life, you need something to do, someone to love, or to face hardship with dignity if in the midst of it. However, I was never one to face suffering with dignity. I have screamed, cried, and bled my way into my current peace. For most of my teens, I clung tightly to writing poetry, painting, and making other forms of art. There was a part of me that was quite self-sufficient. I took pride in not asking for help and helping my own self. However, little did I know that it would also lead to my downfall. We are social creatures after all. Keeping things bottled up inside always comes out later in a much uglier and chaotic form. That's what happened to me. A series of events, one after the other, added up to the trauma in my being, and I exploded right around the age of 19. The explosion manifested as a violent spiritual awakening and a chronic illness. I struggled heavily after the diagnosis with acceptance and shame. It took me a bunch of years to finally come to terms with my illness. In between, I had multiple bouts of stopping medication cold turkey, which would eventually result in multiple relapses. I would think I'm weak for needing medication. I would tell myself I'm strong enough and don't need medication. Added to this, there were the side effects of medication, especially weight gain and constant fluctuations in body mass that would result in emotional instability. There was a period in my early 20s when I became so weak physically and lost so much weight that my mind couldn't function properly. They call it anorexia when your weight is below the average body mass index. That's what happened at that phase. I had stopped my medications and my mind went into overdrive, and hyperactivity ended up as that. I regularly go back and tell my past self that she wasn't weak for needing medication, that it is a strength to accept and come to terms with your illness and care for yourself to keep yourself sane and stable and happy. Of course, even the medication wasn't a one-time fix for everything. It took around 8 years to properly find the medication combination that really worked for me. In between all these years were multiple allergic reactions to trying different medicines, frustration, tears, and the desire to give everything up. So how did I last? Of course, this story is easier to tell as I'm now a little bit on the other side. It would have been hell to tell it had I still been in the midst of it. And I think the answer to how I lasted is a little bit of everything, but most importantly, keeping my faith in God. Keeping faith in God doesn't mean you're not allowed to question Him or get angry. In fact, I believe it is quite the opposite. In order to have a relationship with anyone, honesty is required. Communication and comprehension is required too, above all. Hence, crying to Him, pleading to Him, getting angry with Him, questioning Him, loving Him, being genuinely grateful for your bounties and all other in-betweens helps. Keeping the communication channel open really helps. Sometimes, in the midst of chaos, it is okay to get angry. Sometimes, in the midst of it, it is also noble to trust the process, because that is one of the hardest things to do. Another thing that really saved me was art. Drawing, painting, writing, bleeding my heart out on paper. Of course, there were phases when I was really numb and couldn't express anything. I let myself surrender in that time and let it pass no matter how many years it took. When the desire to create and express resurged, I let myself create like crazy. No matter how raw, ugly, or triggering, I couldn't tell it was saving me when I was creating it all, but in hindsight, the puzzle pieces connect a bit more than before, and I can clearly tell that really helped. Another important factor was spending time in nature with animals as much as possible, amongst the green leaves, humid soft grass, cuddling and petting cats, horses, and the like, letting my feet be bare on the earth and soaking it all in. I know that is not always possible in modern life, and the disconnection from nature is detrimental and causes more illnesses. When in the city and without any access to the bare earth, I would ground myself by putting my feet shoulder width apart and visualizing roots going from my body and feet to the core of the earth. Lastly, finding a why to live helped quite a bit. Even though my initial dreams all shattered one after the other and I didn't immediately give birth to new dreams, as that can't be forced, I gave myself all the time to rest, recover, and rejuvenate, to get away from the grid. Rest is essential to recovery, and yet these days we sometimes think that we have to merit it. I think it is quite the contrary. We merit rest because we exist. Existing itself can get quite cumbersome and requires loads of rest. So take care, dear friends. Rest as much as possible. I don't know if you believe in a God, but one thing's for sure. Art is a balm to the deepest of scars, piercing the human spirit. So create, rest, and try to live. If not, existing is totally fine too. Just take care of yourself.